Let me start by commending Elizabeth Smith on her approach to this debate. The future of Scottish higher education is a serious matter. It deserves a proper debate. Even though I disagreed with some of the points that Elizabeth Smith and David McNulty made, I thought their contributions highlighted many of the key issues we now have to face. Her motion suggests that there is an emerging consensus favouring a graduate contribution as the way forward. But as Claire Baker pointed out, there are significant differences in what people mean when they talk about a graduate contribution, ranging from a permanent, unhypothecated tax hike imposed on all graduates to what amounts to a deferred fees model. Whether a graduate contribution would apply only to future entrants to higher education, or it would affect those currently in the system, or even those now out of the system who have benefited from higher education, needs to be made clear. The acceptability of a graduate contribution model will be dependent not just on the form it takes, but also the rate at which it's set, the mechanisms for payment, and the thresholds at which payment is triggered, amongst other things. On the other side, universities have a strong interest not just in how much money will be made available to them as the result of the introduction of a graduate contribution, but also in how it will affect their business model, the prices they're permitted to charge per student for different courses, the number of students they can recruit, and so on. Before I became an MSP, my job was to coordinate the strategy of Glasgow Caledonian University, authoring the strategic plan, modelling the impact of changes in provision on funding and vice versa, and managing change. For example, I was responsible for bringing about 1,000 students from the nursing colleges in Glasgow into the university. The funding arrangements for the nursing diploma students at the time were very different from those applying to degree students, even students on nursing degrees. Caledonian, like the other post-1992 universities, has a significant proportion of its full-time equivalents who are day release, block release or part-time students. The debate so far has taken little account of the increasing proportion of students who are not school leavers on conventional four-year full-time degree courses, but how any new system would affect them. And I would perhaps refer to open university students, but I see our colleague from Tübingen is no longer with us. Because the system is so complex, because people mean very different things when referring to graduate contribution as the way forward in looking at university funding, because the system we have is so different to the system we might end up with if we move towards any of the graduate contribution options, I believe a substantial amount of preparatory work is needed before any final choice can be made. We must build a consensus because whatever we put in place has got to last a long time. We cannot afford mistakes or misunderstandings. We must not introduce a system that has any serious flaws. Above all, we must not now allow anyone to think that the entire cost of higher education could or should be funded through a graduate contribution. There will be a continuing requirement for an exchequer contribution, and what the ratio between that which is raised from individual beneficiaries and what should be contributed from general taxation is an absolutely crucial question. It's because these questions are avoided by the government that I'm so critical of the approach being taken by Mr Russell. Even as the graduate endowment was being removed with a great fanfare, it should have been obvious that we would end up returning to the QB principles. Before May 2007, the SNP made huge promises to students, the abolition of student debt, the perpetuation of free higher education, all of which they are unable to keep. The amendment in Mike Russell's name omits any reference to the unsustainability of the present funding structure, but instead refers to the Scottish Government needing to respond to the outcomes of the Brown Review. The Brown Review will undoubtedly change the game, but let's be clear, the game's been a bogey for some time now. Scottish arrangements for funding of higher education have compromised the effectiveness of our higher educational institutions. The unsustainability of what we have does not date from whenever the Brown Review is published. It's recognised by all the key groups referred to in the original motion. What has been lacking has been any political will on the part of the SNP to allow these issues to be addressed. Mr Russell and his predecessor set their face against an independent review and pretended our universities were not facing severe financial difficulties, but they are. They set up a joint futures task force involving the universities, but prohibited its members from addressing the issue of funding. And now Mike Russell wants to have a private chat with the principals to see if he can come up with a Scottish solution. A kilt won't do it. Let's be clear. Scottish universities and colleges must be involved in any deliberations. But surely the way forward is not private discussions, which Mr Russell has favoured up till now, nor a green paper, which is simply a device to kick the issue in the long grass beyond May 2011, but a systematic review which deals not just with funding for universities, but with the equally important issue of student support. A review that asks hard questions about how the sector can adapt to better meet the needs of students, to maintain its international competitiveness and to help stimulate economic growth, together with the important questions raised by Hugh Henry in his excellent contribution. Any independent review could have been set up at any time in the last 18 months. The reality now is our universities are on the brink of crisis. We've had 3 years of procrastination from the SNP, and they're still refusing a proper review of funding arrangements. The spending review is due next month. We've had no ideas, no plans, nothing from the benches over there. It's a disgrace. It's time for them to move over. If they're going to deny the issue, let's get a change of government and the issues properly addressed. Thank you.